This is Comic Book Lexicon. I'm Stephen Thomas.
And I'm Joshua of Grand Rapids. And we are presently looking at X-Men Volume 2, Number 2. But that is not what we will be looking at in depth tonight. The whole reason I brought this is there's an interesting ad in the back of this. When I first got this, I was really, really excited about it. I hadn't started going to comic book shops yet, so everything was being found on newsstands, and I think I had to wait for this to show up in one of those packs with other comics.
Multi-pack, yeah.
Then I open it up. X-Men 1 kicked so much ass, and this kicked ass too. But when I get to the last page, I kind of feel like I need to go to my room because I don't want my mom to see this. My house is, some sort of evangelical. We went to a Pentecostal church. We didn't do Halloween. We didn't do shit. I wasn't allowed to watch He-Man. This kicked ass. But my mom was not going to see the inside of this comic. This image, because of that, was burned in my head until I finally found my own copies of The Legion of Night. And it's really interesting that people don't talk about it much. Because whether they like it or not, whether they like the book or not, I'd imagine tons of people would have picked it up, right?
Yeah.
Because this is the follow-up to the best-selling comic of all time. X-Men number 1, with its 5 different covers or whatever, sold 8 million copies. Sold more than 1 million per variant cover, I should say. And this is on that year's best-selling top 10 list or whatever, right between two of the different covers for X-Men number 1. One of them sold at 1.7 million plus 43,000 for newsstand. One sold at 1.4 million with another 43,000 for newsstand. So this sold probably at least 1.5 million copies, and I'm sure there were a lot of speculators involved, but that is at least, it's at least 1 million eyeballs.
Yeah.
Catching this ad.
And Marvel wouldn't have put it in there if they
Right.
weren't going to print, hundreds of thousands of copies of it.
Right. So you seem like you've got huge backing. It's meant to be seen by a lot of people. It was seen by a lot of people. And I can't imagine that imagery not drumming up interest in a bunch of kids that knew they weren't supposed to have it but wanted it anyway.
That was a big thing in the 90s, was like they would try to market stuff to that whole... Because my household is not as strict as yours, but I still grew up in a pretty religious household. And there were so many things that I felt were almost like marketed to me. Like, you're not supposed to have this or watch this. But we know you really want to touch it.
I mean, that was a cornerstone of what built anime culture.
Oh shit! Oh shit!
Yes.
So, we're going to be looking at Legion of Night. Written by Steve Gerber. Pencils by Whilce Portacio. I think it's some of Whilce Portacio's best stuff, or it's at least some of my favorite stuff of his. Mm-hmm. Inks respectively by Scott Williams and Dan Panosian between issue 1 and issue 2. And the coloring is done by Paul Mouse. And it's really interesting digital coloring. So, let's walk through it. The first page is really just setting the mood, because the point of the first issue, I think you'd agree, is just, well, at least half the point, is that this is a confusing situation.
Very confusing, yes.
Gerber knows how convoluted it is, and he's not trying to compensate for it. He's making that a feature. And so you've got this character, Melissa, apparently insane. We're going to find out she's probably not. But she's seeing all these horrible things. And her caretaker in the hospital she's at, it basically just ends up sedating her, because she, not only is she talking crazy, but she is saying some things that are direct out of her caretaker's life. Like, how do you know these things?
Yeah.
And then she like pulls her caretaker's hair, so she's like, "That's it.
Yeah.
Drugs are up." So it's not just like you're talking crazy and I'm tired of it. It's like you're probably dangerous.
Yeah, she's talking about how, like her boyfriend or her husband is like behind her back.
Yeah, cheating.
He's seeing Tracy behind your back, like as she's passing out. Her caretaker's like, "How do you know that? How do you know anything about my life or whatever?"
Right.
And then it cuts to these two characters.
Yeah, the important character in the situation is Jennifer. She's just having a normal conversation with her boyfriend, and she starts what looks like she's having cramps, but you can see she's having a psychic vision. This man's falling from the sky. Little man falls through her hand like a little hologram into what looks like an ocean, but it's just the grass. He asks if that's happened before, and she makes a period joke. He says, "That's not funny. We need to get you somewhere safe," and she's kind of just trying to reassure him. Now we cut to Cruel Fate magazine, which is like a weekly world news
Or like
type of gimmick.
Inquirer or something like that.
It's specifically paranormal stuff. It's
okay.
Yeah, Journal of the Paranormal. They talk
Okay.
later about UFOs and psychic stuff. He's trying to get a hold, Martin. He's trying to get a hold of this lawyer named Blackwater, who's working on a case called the Calder case, and I kind of like that. Like the bad guy in this is
The name of the...
yeah, Alexander Calder did a sculpture that's in the middle of our city that is practically the city logo in Grand Rapids. But Martin's trying to get a hold of Calder. Hasn't been able to get a hold of him all day. He thinks that he's just being a hoity-toity lawyer. Like, then he finally gets a hold of him. And as soon as he says, I want to talk about the Calder case, he gets hung up on. And now we meet Blackwater.
Yep.
This is the lawyer he's on the phone with, falling to his death.
And we see this. This is in the first page of the book. It's like this little dagger, and it's in his neck.
Yeah. This strange handle is featured on this knife here. And as he falls, he bookends this recollection of him meeting Calder. Calder is the leader of a church, and this church has a bunch of members whose families and loved ones in general have tried taking the church to court on multiple charges, including drugs, child pornography, crazy stuff.
Yeah, so it's cultish, but
Yeah.
they don't call it a cult.
Right, and that's even taken through by Blackwater, as he's like, okay, like let's talk about what your activities are. Let's talk about your writings. And he's like, we don't have any writings. He's like, well, you understand that sounds like a cult. Like, you don't have any like predetermined belief system. You've got a leader who could easily be making stuff up on the cuff.
Yeah.
That sounds like a cult. Calder likens the persecution they're taking from the families and the state prosecutors to anti-Semitism. Hardly accurate, but he makes a little bit of an argument, wins the lawyer over. Lawyer's Blackwater asking, can you handle my retainer? How's 2,000 or 200,000 sound? Let's talk 3. So we've established these are both either corrupt men or corruptible.
Yes.
Now we're at the church. You said this looked like the Illuminati.
Well, it's just the pyramid with the eye. So
Yeah.
it's like, it's a Illuminati-ish. Or
A lot of weird Masonic imagery.
Yeah, like, not even necessarily Illuminati exactly, but like that whole vibe or whatever.
Yeah. But this church is global. It's got people all over the country and all over the world that are unofficial members that basically get consulting appointments from the church. but locally they are a commune. And so everyone that attends the actual church is a resident, and the commune is self-sufficient as far as power is concerned. It's mostly self-sufficient with food. They handle all their own finances. They handle their own everything. Blackwater is taken to meet the high priestess, who is also the chief of security.
Looking very much like you said, like is this is the high priestess?
Yeah.
She looks like you said Portacio.
Yeah, if you forgot Portacio was working on this book, now you remember, because she looks like any one of the Hellions or upstarts.
Yeah.
He's taken into the data center, where they both physically, you can see them dealing with boxes over there, but they've also got computers. They physically store all their records and keep data of all their records, and he kind of comments on how that looks an awful lot like a business. And she snaps back with, well, the state is requiring us to keep all these records to verify that we're a church. So, how do you feel about that irony? And he's like, I feel like I understand it, basically, but I want you to be aware of what the jury is expecting to hear and what might favor you, what might not. He goes on to say that he wants to meet up with the residents, and he'd prefer that she and Calder not be there.
Yeah.
Meets up with a woman that was married to a Detroit auto executive. He went under when the industry did in 87, or sorry, 82, somewhere in the early 80s.
Yeah, it says 82.
Yeah. There was a recession in 87 that affected this guy. So much 80s.
She's got the pirate boots on.
Yeah, and she talks about how she afterwards embraced the warrior woman inside her, which I guess explains the get up here, and donated almost everything that she had to the church and never looked back.
Yeah.
This guy, basically a TLDR to sum it up himself, that he retroactively considers himself, or at least the man he was, to be unadulterated yuppie scum. He's like, now I don't own anything and I couldn't be happier. And we land finally on this guy that used to own a construction company. He was very promiscuous. While he owned that company, one of the women that he hooked up with had a book on reincarnation. He started reading it when he had diarrhea and just fell down the rabbit hole, and it led him here, and he donated all his money, and he's very pleased that his kids are pissed about it.
Yeah.
And you see this type of storytelling a lot where it's essentially one image
And they chop
cut
it
up to imply a passing of time. Portacio does it here better than most of what I have ever seen with this, because most of it's uniform, and it's just done there as kind of symbolically. The only constants here are his hand holding the recorder and all the edges of the background. She's cut off, he's cut off, he's cut off.
Yeah.
So you're placing these people very definitely in the same place, very definitely at different times, and I love that.
That is really, I didn't even think about that, but you pointing it out makes total sense.
I couldn't stop looking at it when I was reading it. Fast forward to them going to court. Clearly this man's innocent. All charges are thrown out. The jury decides in their favor to 100%, and everyone's very satisfied with themselves until Blackwater immediately after. He was too intrigued by the case to leave it alone. Goes to a bookstore, and this girl is like, this 6-year-old girl. She says she's 6 in the book, and it's important to remember that.
You said this bookstore, you looked up that word.
Oh, yes. Yes, I did. Damus, or Damuz. That was a Sumerian god that got later relegated to a demon by, early Christians. So every little bit and piece of this has been interestingly researched. But he walks into this store, meets this little 6-year-old girl. She's been waiting for him. Grandpa's already getting the book you want. How do you know about the book I want? Well, your shadow told me. He's like, I've never heard of a shadow coming in ahead of me before. What else has my shadow told you? You're going to die soon. Uh-huh. He's thoroughly freaked out by it, but he still goes ahead and takes the book. Yeah. This book is the Aten Dekan. They say it translates to the Book of the Falling Sun. And it seems like it's a Book of the Dead type of thing, wouldn't you say that? A very Lovecraftian type of demonic text.
Yeah.
And then he reads this, and it's kind of like an anti-Ten Commandments, or rather a 10 Commandments for very bad people.
Yeah.
And
do ye these things, that darkness may fall, glorify indulgence and revile conscience, scorn magnificence and exalt what is common. When endeavor fails, plunder. When inspiration fails, deceive. Where reason rules, sow confusion. To the strong offer nothing, to the weak power. Seduce the children. Destroy the legions of night, for they are the disciples of the moon, and their vision pierces the shadows.
That's pretty fucked up shit, right?
Yeah.
And when he's done reading that page, he gets a call from his partner. It's not clearly stated, girlfriend or wife, but it doesn't matter. He's missing a date that they've scheduled. And he explains that he's not feeling well. And besides, he's got a lot of research he's got to do for a hard-ass client. And she kind of goes from feeling bad and, wondering if she should bring him chicken soup or something, to being a little jealous and wondering if that client is maybe another woman. And he kids around with her and feels a little flattered, but he still has this rock in his stomach that he can't get rid of. Goes to Summit Distributors, Inc. It's a warehouse that deals in obviously illegal stuff. You know that right away because he asks to get in and look at stuff. No cops, no cops. No subpoenas, no subpoenas. Well, how much is it worth to you? Flashes 100 to get in, and immediately the guy explains that these tapes aren't labeled, so I hope you brought a VCR with you. Yeah. Which kind of implies that
there's some bad stuff on them.
Yeah, you don't have that many tapes unlabeled that you want to sell unless you're selling bad stuff on those tapes. And he's like, "Don't worry, I'm not interested in any of these tapes. I'm interested in knowing if you've seen some people." Leafs through a bunch of photos just like you see in the movies, and it's no until we get to the old construction worker. He recognizes him. That guy's brought in a portfolio of kid stuff, hint, hint, if you know what I'm saying. And he says that the guy explained that some of the kids in the pictures were his grandkids. If you believe that. I do.
And now this is him. He's sitting in his office and he's just recording some of his findings and thoughts about the case onto his memo, voice memo. Kind
of like mapping his suspicions out.
Yeah.
As he wraps that up, he's getting that call that we saw our buddy Marvin at Cruel Fate make. So this is where Marvin gets hung up on, and this is why. They show up. Stop what you're doing. We know what you're doing.
Yeah.
If you keep looking into this, we're gonna kill you. Yeah. We could kill you right now. And he goes for his filing cabinet because they're asking for all the material, so it's unsuspiciously him getting those materials. But he's got like a 44 Magnum in there or something. Pulls it out. Don't be stupid. And everyone decides to be stupid together. He fires and hits this guy. She throws the knife that you see sticking out of his neck at the beginning. And then we continue to Calder instructing another woman, actually, the woman from Detroit, to shoot him in the chest, which she does. And he falls down and says that he falls through this puddle. Like, he approaches the puddle expecting pavement to be under it, but he just keeps going. Because he's in some sort of afterlife or dream world already. And we find out very quickly that this woman here is his mom. And she tells him, basically, like, I expected you to be here, or at least I should have. You're a narcissistic, overly ambitious piece of shit. And then she goes on to tell him to eat his peas. But those aren't peas.
Those are roaches.
Yeah.
And they're turning into one big roach.
Yeah. Or some kind of disgusting
Gnarly
giant
bug.
insect.
Yeah.
And she kind of describes that this is the darkness inside him, but he shouldn't be afraid of the darkness, because the only people who are afraid of the darkness and hide from it are the people that get consumed by it. And he needs to confront his darkness and even embrace it. And as this bug continues to grow, he starts changing. Like, you see this almost like symbiote Black Spider-Man type stuff going on around his hands, while his face is changing quite a bit. His hair's getting longer, almost like David Bowie Labyrinth vibe there. And like,
Looks like the Batarang.
yeah, slices this bug in half and tells his mom it's dead.
This is my favorite drawing in part 1.
Yeah,
I don't know why I just like that so much.
this could have been the cover. I mean, I'm glad it wasn't, because that kicks ass.
That's a sick cover.
I can't believe Portasio also did that. Like, it almost doesn't look like his drawing style.
Yeah.
It's not like I can't believe he can draw that well. It's just crazy that it's him. It looks like two different people.
Yeah.
And his mom basically explains that he's, this being called Omen now. And he's part of the Legion of Night. And he has to take care of some bad guys, but he better watch out because they know he's coming. And as soon as that conversation is finished, he wakes up and realizes he did not fall through that puddle.
He hit the pavement.
Yeah. Super, super fucked up corpse who, by no will of his own, like, it's clear that someone is controlling his body, gets up, removes the knife, and starts limping down the street. I love that you can see how the one foot's getting dragged.
What's interesting too is, like, there's a lot of, like, digital treatment in here, but this is, I'm assuming, because I've done this on watercolor paper, this is watercolor and this is red ink, like the same way you get out of like a India ink bottle, but it'd be like a red one, and you just put the ink here and it bleeds into the water or whatever. So I don't believe that that's a computer made.
No, I don't either. Especially since they didn't have like brush packs and stuff like that for coloring suites back then. And we're back with Melissa. She starts having an interesting rant about a character that brings us to realize that all of this is happening in Marvel continuity. So there have been, 3 characters that, if you're really, really into Steve Gerber and take meticulous track of every character he's created, have been in other Marvel books, but they're just regular people.
Yeah.
Now she's talking about Fin Fang Foom.
So Iron Man. Villain, right?
Yeah, an alien dragon who was manipulated by communists and then ended up crushing the communists. Like weird, crazy old Silver Age stuff. But Fin Fang Foom is an Iron Man villain. And she's talking about him coming. And we cut over back to Jennifer's boyfriend. She's not in bed. He tries to find her, looking very much like me. He just needs a mustache. And she's talking to this orb and tells him that he needs to get out of here. Meanwhile, Martin is in Blackwater's office. Smashed window that he went through. Signs of struggle and violence all over, but no sign of what happened to Blackwater. And he's kind of talking to the detective about that. And the detective almost seems more interested in how he ended up because he used to be apparently a very good reporter working for a very reputable journal. And this detective seems more interested in what happened to him and why he's working for this stupid UFO magazine.
Yeah, he says, isn't that dopey UFO rag my mother used to get at the candy store?
Yeah. So he's more interested in what's going on with Martin than he is in solving the Blackwater case.
Yeah.
And as they continue to have this conversation, they're walking on the New York grates over Blackwater's body.
Yeah. Now we're back at the church, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. It looks like a fucking satanic rave.
Yeah.
But they're basically just preparing to perform rites to bring forth what they're calling the beast. And you see, like, a lot of people are engaging in carnal activity down in the crowd. Stuff I'm sure Portasio was happy to draw after being on a code book for years.
It says, worship the beast with your bodies. Pray to the beast with your minds and your hearts. Shake the beast awake that he may bring on the final night.
Yes.
So they're trying to awaken or conjure the beast.
Yes, and it has gone unnamed, but from what Melissa is saying, we can hazard a guess pretty easily. And we cut to this. There's our buddy Chan and his work friend, in the People's Republic of China, wondering what's going on as an earthquake starts to happen. And we see the earth opening up as both the ceremony commences and all of our psychic friends that we've met, including even Blackwater, who is somehow aware of this, probably because that Omen character inside of him.
And they're saying Tanu Ragam.
And we find out that Antanu is what they call this beast.
Yeah.
And this beast is definitely Fin Fang Foom.
Yes.
So to everyone that wanted Fin Fang Foom to show up in one of the Iron Man movies, would not you rather Fin Fang Foom show up in a hard R
Yeah.
horror action adventure mystery?
Yeah.
But he burst out of the earth in China. Meanwhile, we've got Calder and his high priestess, and he's distraught because while he believed all of this was going to happen, he didn't think it was going to happen in his lifetime. So he's a bit crestfallen because he can't be Mr. Boss Man.
Yeah.
His days as they are over.
Yeah, he's not the top
Yeah.
guy anymore.
Now we've got Blackwater.
One of the sickest drawings in the...
Yeah, just soak this in. Look at all the broken bones.
Like you said,
Eye bulging out.
the collarbones.
Yeah,
like, kinda
double
shoot
busted
up.
clavicle.
That finger, I don't know why that's the one that grosses me out.
Because he's been consistent with it in every
God.
page.
Yeah.
Even.
Yeah, it grosses me out.
But Blackwater's been held in this position. Well, maybe not this posture and position, but he hasn't been able to move from where he's at since Omen took him there 3 days ago.
Yeah,
So
he's
he's
just
been
sitting
sitting
there.
And Blackwater's finally able to move as he sees this sprite. Follows it. It leads them all through the sewer, finally up the ladder to the street. So He was just down there to keep him out of sight. That's the only reason he was down in the sewer for 3 days. He hobbles up the street to the bookstore, and there's the little girl again. She was clearly waiting for him.
Yeah, it's him. And then it cuts to St. Louis, and this is Melissa, right?
Yeah. Melissa's orderly catches her. All these conversations she's apparently been having with herself, she's been having with someone on the other side of that orb. And we're back to Fin Fang Foom in China. Chang narrowly escapes as the Jeep flips over on his work friend, and he's remembering this all ties back not only to a prophecy of Fin Fang Foom showing up again, but he remembers when Fin Fang Foom showed up the first time. And suddenly the orb swallows him.
And so here's Blackwater, right?
Yeah. And Grandpa and the little girl bring him some food, and he's like, oh, you want me to eat and get well? So I didn't think I was still alive. And they're like, oh, don't worry, you're not. And now Jennifer's on a plane. She was who was talking to Melissa on the other end of the orb, but she didn't go into the orb, clearly. Like, she decided to take a plane to wherever they're meeting up, and I think she's flying all the way from California to New York City, and she is thinking about the swamp. We didn't talk about it, but she mentions the swamp earlier in the story that she grew up by right before she has her psychic attack, and now she's back at the swamp. This is not Man-Thing. It's a vision of Man-Thing that she's having and talking to, kind of like an embodiment of someone's realization of faith, like, oh, this is my purpose, this is what I'm doing, I'm on the right path, and this Man-Thing image is just replacing the person next to her in the plane to have that reassuring conversation.
Because typically at this point in Marvel's publishing history, Man-Thing just not very vocal.
Yeah, Man-Thing doesn't speak at all.
Yeah.
He just walks around and burns people that are scared.
Yeah.
And Steve Gerber knew this very much because Steve Gerber wrote the character. Steve Gerber, creator of Howard the Duck, introduced Howard the Duck in an issue of Man-Thing. So
Yeah.
Fin Fang Foom causes a bunch of turbulence on the plane, and she starts wondering what she's got herself into, but she's, operating with a level of confidence nonetheless.
Some faith.
Yeah. So it turns out when Chan fell into that orb, it was all Melissa's doing. She freaks him out a little bit, but they decide to get on their way. She ends up convincing him that, like, I'm not crazy, I just know too much. It seems obnoxious, but it's okay.
And they're going back to the dragon's dream.
Yes.
And straight on to hell.
Yeah, but they're making a stop on the way first.
This is funny.
Yeah. You want to talk about it?
Yeah, so, well, we were looking at this beforehand, and this, old man and the little girl, right?
Yeah.
They're trying to help Blackwater up to his apartment, right?
Yes.
And as they're going to the police scene, they're like, oh, what's going on? Isn't that the guy or whatever who supposedly fell out the window?
Yeah.
And they're like, he's like, Charles Blackwater, ? And he's like, go away. And they're like, we can't do that, sir. And they're like, it's a police matter. You'll have to come with us. And he's like, the matter is settled. And he looks all crazy.
Yeah, he shoots some, cosmic energy out of his fucked up eyes, and they just walk away like zombies.
It's funny because there's no dialogue between them. They're just like, nope.
Yeah.
And so then they go up into his apartment, and I'll let you take over again.
We're back at Marvin. Marvin's at his computer trying to get his modem to work. He's been having problems with that through the whole thing. And the orb is obviously appearing on the other end of his screen. And as Melissa shows up, everyone's been pulled there. So we've got Chan and Melissa arriving to everyone having already shown up in Blackwater's apartment. And as Blackwater tells them that they've all been assembled to fight the beast, the same turbulence that disrupted the plane shakes the whole apartment. And he's here. He knows they're here. And he knows that they're going to try to stop them. So he's trying to circumvent all of that proactively. And Fin Fang Foom has just destroyed half of that apartment building. And there's just carnage all over.
I wish I could remember exactly what you said about this page. There was something definitive about the whole storyline between Fin Fang Foom and Almond. I just can't remember exactly what it is.
Fin Fang Foom is the beast whose dream that they're trying to wake in reality.
Okay.
And that's important to know. And I think that's what I had told you earlier.
Yeah.
Fin Fang Foom is the dreaming beast, and they're trying to make his dreams reality by waking him up and having him ensue all the terror that he saw put before him in the dream, basically. Make it real. So they decide the way to stop him is to go into his dream. So while he is having a physical attack on New York, they're going to be having an astral attack on him in his mind.
Yeah.
And they're all deciding to enter the dream.
And this is where Blackwater transforms back into Almond.
Yeah.
I shall require a moment to effect the separation.
Yeah, he actually leaves the body. Blackwater's body's going to stay at the apartment. Calder and his high priestess watching everything unfold on the news. He remains, I don't want to say disaffected, but disenchanted with all of it, while her resolve remains completely steadfast.
Yeah. She's like, your followers are waiting for you, and he's sort of like, whatever. If you want to lead them, you lead them if you want. And then, are you giving me total power over the fellowship? And he's just like, ha. He's like, you still don't grasp what's happened, do you, Hildreth? There's no power to be had at the head of this bunch of narcissists and sociopaths. All that ended when the dream began. None of this matters anymore. The money, the property, control over every aspect of our little cultist, little lives, all meaningless. So is he like, let me ask you, he's not really like a devout follower.
He is.
He is. But he's like bummed that he's not like...
Right. It's like if a preacher believes in God but is still getting rich out of the collection plate.
Yeah.
And he just realized that the collection plate is on fire.
Yeah. And he says the beast could dream it or us away at any moment.
Right.
So... But she remains devout, like she's dedicated to Fin Fang Foom or whatever.
Yeah. So she makes her way through the church into a special chamber and says, Antanu, devour me. And so she is. She's engulfed in flame, pulled into his little astral universe of his dream. And we find out pretty soon that all these little demons here are all the souls of his victims that he's killed previously. Everyone's still suiting up in Blackwater's apartment. And we don't really... It's never explained why Jennifer is changing her clothes, but that's what she's putting on.
Yeah.
So
it's hot.
It at least there's continuity.
Yeah.
And this is his dream as they all enter it.
Yeah. And it's wild.
These are the souls of all his victims acting out a play of what he wants to see happen to the earth.
You know what's really interesting? Like when we were looking at this before, you said this was like almost like box sheets, like cartoonish or whatever.
Yeah, it's got a very like almost Cool World type of vibe.
What's funny is this, If you ever seen American Pop, I don't know why these figures right here, those faces just look.
I definitely see that.
But yeah, this is, you said before, and this is the cover of part 2.
Yeah.
So if we look at the cover of part 2, it's this with another image like in the background.
Yeah, and we'll get there.
Yeah.
And everyone is pretty much good to go except Martin. He doesn't know how to follow his shadow, as they've been saying. Omen directs the little girl to help Martin out. She is not doing anything more than touching him, but that's apparently all he needs to have brief contact with his shadow and start fighting all these souls. As everyone else continues to fight, she takes him, the little girl, takes Martin on a special mission down into almost literally the belly of the beast, wouldn't you say? But
yeah, it says worst part of the dream. It's where your shadow wanted to go.
yeah, and they arrive at this pagoda as they're trying to make their way into the core of the dream. And they see this guy, and he is Fin Fang Foom's first victim. And they're all kind of instructed to ignore him because he's just illusion, but they're also kind of not given a choice because he starts engaging them physically immediately, tears his chest open, and all these souls of other victims pour out and start trying to rip them to shreds, so they have no choice but to fight and engage this hollow man standing at the gate of this pagoda. I really like the way that Omen fights this little guy here. All this hair grows out of his fingertips.
And penetrates his skin.
Impales his head.
Yeah.
And Jennifer saves the day. The storytelling is kind of interesting. It travels horizontally.
It's a lot of horizontal spreads.
She kind of like does a Carol Danvers binary thing and just roasts everybody, and that gives us an opportunity to see her shadow, so you kind of get a visual of what everybody's been talking about. Omen asks, what's in the hole? He's like, nothing, it's just a hole. And he's like, okay, you're clearly lying. And so they enter the pagoda and descend down into the depths of the dream. Meanwhile, Martin and the little girl are making their way through that underbelly of the dream. And this is a gallery of... I'd almost rather read it.
Yeah.
But keep in mind, this is a 6-year-old girl explaining this to a grown man. So he says, good Lord, what? She says, dead babies and their moms. They died because he forced them. He, the beast? Yeah. Forced them to have his children. So these are entirely non-consensual pairings with Fin Fang Foom that led to pregnancies that apparently couldn't come to term. But part of this cult's whole apocalypse involves the offspring of Fin Fang Foom and a woman.
Yeah.
And just as they get there, they walk in on Fin Fang Foom, banging the high priestess.
They're doing it.
Everyone's still just in a state of descent. We're mostly here just for the visuals, but they come to this lake of fire here. They can't go through that because no matter how will-based their actions are, like, they can't will their way out of being consumed by fire. So they have to take this bridge through more goblins. But it's just more comic book fighting. It's not important. What's real important is Fin Fang Foom maybe having the first consensual sex in his whole life.
I like they draw just a centimeter of a titty.
Yeah, just a little bit of areola.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been on code-approved books his whole life. He's got to get his jams in where he can.
Yeah.
But he finally makes contact enough with his shadow to will something to happen. But what happens is they kind of grow to the size of Fin Fang Foom and her giant astral self that is having sex with him. So their cover's blown. They can't hide. And this is right as she's explaining that they kind of have to act fast anyway, because this conception is as rapid of a process as Fin Fang Foom wants it to be.
Yeah, he has control over how long it takes for the baby to...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she's like, who are these people? Where the fuck are they from? They think they are the legions of night. They think they can disrupt the dream. They haven't the power. Little 6-year-old girl performing a cesarean abortion.
Plunges her hand into the high priestess' stomach and pulls out a baby Fin Fang Foom.
Yes, I do have the power. Sea beast, it's dead. I killed your kid.
It's an intense climax.
And the more comic book fighting is happening on the bridge. Again, it doesn't matter. This is just creating a time-based obstacle to halt everyone from being able to operate in unison.
Yeah.
That's all this fight's for.
And he's like, you've blasphemed, or you profaned this chamber of passion, torn the future from its womb. My master speaks to me. He demands your life.
Give him this. And she throws the dead baby at Fin Fang Foom, who, while he destroys New York, is so emotionally devastated by having his dead child thrown at his face that he just stops what he's doing and lets out a Godzilla screech.
Yeah.
But that's all right for him, because in his head he's got, our little 6-year-old girl by the throat saying, I'm gonna kill you.
Yeah.
But she calls out for Omen. And Omen has finally made his way across enough of that bridge, I suppose, to throw his hand. I mean, all of his bladed weapons have come from his body.
Yes.
As has this sword. So he he throws this sword. It hits Fin Fang Foom dead center in the skull. He's not dead. He's jumping.
Plunging.
Yeah, jumping into the water here, screaming about a splitting headache. So we've only momentarily thwarted him. We haven't defeated him, and that's what this whole conversation is about. And we basically bleed into Omen soliloquizing about his tenuous tether to Blackwater, but also his developing relationship with Blackwater's body. This is setting something up that never happens. And you said that you saw that Gerber was able to talk Marvel into kind of wrapping it up, like there was a little follow-up in a Midnight Suns book.
Yeah, there's like a back, what's it called? Like a
backup story.
A backup story in one of the issues of the Midnight Suns, and like he had wanted to like write more of these characters, but Marvel just, I guess, was not interested, according to what I read. I mean, who knows what's right. And actually, like this, what's interesting about this is, whatever you feel about this specific book, you can't tell me that this would not have made a cool developing story had it gone forward, and like different artists and different writers would have got their chance to play with
the
these
stuff
characters.
that Epic was putting out at the time.
Yeah.
Like they were doing Hellraiser ongoing stuff.
Yeah.
They were doing Nightbreed ongoing stuff, and both of those books are really interesting.
Yeah.
Both of them are interesting enough and sought after enough that people outside of comics that don't read comics, just horror nuts, collect those books. They wouldn't do that with just any shitty licensed property.
Yeah. I just wonder what original horror books were happening during this period that were popular. I mean,
certainly nothing that was like exploring Lovecraftian pseudo-Satanist.
Yeah, and it's like, it's got like this kind of thriller. I mean, he's a lawyer, but he's almost acting like a detective, and certain
Yeah,
parts of it.
it's checking a lot of boxes.
Yeah.
It's a fantasy adventure.
Yeah.
It's a supernatural drama.
Yeah.
It's a detective story.
It's just like, I mean, I get it because in 91, I mean, it's not an easy read. It's pretty rewarding, but it's not like, well, Hellboy is like pretty easy to read.
Yeah. And this is a mess, but it's a fun mess.
Yeah, it's an interesting mess. And I feel like this would make way more sense as it developed.
Yeah.
Like if it would have kept going, it would have been like, oh, that's like such an amazing setup to have so much chaos and so much happening to like have this monumental event happen to set off this entire universe of characters.
Yeah.
Whatever.
And it's also interesting that they didn't have interest in continuing, but they had no problem implying that they did.
Yeah.
This book had an editor.
Yeah.
They had no problem with the way it ended, the way it was very obviously leading you in to some sort of intended continuation. They had no problem not just staple binding these and putting them together on nicer than Baxter paper, hard cardstock cover, square bound.
Yeah.
$5 in 1991.
Yeah, and it's like you said, it had a full page ad in one of the highest selling comic books.
Of
all
one of
time.
the highest of 1991. Yeah, and a follow up to the highest of all
time. Yeah, I gotta think if that number 2 or whatever, even if it's the, it has to be, if you sell that many million books,
Yeah.
like even 2 million has to be one of the top 20 of all time. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, and that 2 million number is a big deal, or that 1.5 million number is a big deal, because you can chalk up the fact that this didn't go anywhere else, or you don't hear much about it, to Marvel's very peculiar relationship, like antagonistic relationship with Steve Gerber. But it wasn't too antagonistic to make these.
makes
And this
sense.
could be a weird Netflix series, but it wasn't like that at
Yeah.
the time.
But like
There was no precedent set, so like, just to clarify it for anyone.